Welcome to Kevjet the podcast, Graham Wright from Tokyo Police Club.
It's me. I'm here. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be chatting with you.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's a new series that Kevjet is doing. It's the run up to Canada Day London, which you guys are going to headline.
Yeah, I heard about Canada Day London years ago because I keep referring to this and I hope they're not like, please stop talking about that. But there was one year where apparently it got so rowdy that the next year they were like, you're not allowed to have Canada Day in Trafalgar Square anymore. You guys are it's too much. And I felt a patriotic pride when I heard that. And also, I thought I really want to play that show. So I'm glad that our last ever London show, not that we're going to ruin it for everyone. I'm sure they'll be allowed to have it next year, but I want to see what the vibes are like.
Yeah, it was rowdy. I was there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was rowdy, as in like people were enjoying their alcoholic beverages and the
Hmm.
music, which led to people going into the fountains, which they do not like in Trafalgar Square.
The special fountains. Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
when it did happen again, there's lots of security around the
Hmm.
fountains, which helps because it actually stopped the show and they were like, we're shutting down if people do not get out of the fountain.
Well, that's it. There's this threshold of how nuts a show can get. And it's fun, and you're on stage and it feels very heady to be looking out and seeing people climbing trees or whatever. But if it stops the show, then all the energy gets like smashes into a wall and it can get weird really quickly. And
Of
so you
course.
always want it to go to just below the maximum, but never push the actual threshold, lest your whole party get completely ruined.
It's going to be great. It's a great party atmosphere. What are your expectations for it?
I genuinely have no idea what to expect. I don't even know if I've been to Trafalgar Square. I mean, I must have at some point in my travels, but it's been 20 years. And so I can't even in my mind's eye quite picture what it's going to be like to be standing there. But I've always found just being in London as well as playing in London, there's just a certain je ne sais quoi to it, a certain vibe that I've never caught anywhere else that's always really resonated with me. I've always been the one in the band being like, let's go back, let's do it again. I don't care if we don't make any money. And cooler heads have prevailed, which is sad for me, but probably good for my finances. Uh, but yeah, so what I'm expecting is just to hopefully really be in like a nexus of those vibes, like outdoors amidst the architecture, but also amidst the people and amidst the Londonness of it all. Yeah, I'm expecting it to be cool.
It's very cool. I'm very excited for the day. I'll be mooching around backstage, doing some interviews. Yeah, it'll be great. So I'm looking forward to having you guys over and meeting you all and just having a party because that's what the day is about.
Yeah, and it's our farewell to Tokyo Police Club playing in London party.
Yeah, let's
So
talk
double
about that.
double for us.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about that because it's like the farewell tour. What actually brought the final tour? How did that happen?
Well, it just sort of snuck up on us in a way, which I know it's just the four of us. We had to do it, so it's not as though it was no one surprised us with it. But I think we kind of surprised ourselves with it. I surprised myself because you start the band. We started the band when we were in high school, and typically when you start a band, it's because you want to be in a band really bad. And then we got to do it. We got to the record came out and it had profile, and we got to tour, and we got to it became our job really quickly. And so the one thing that never happens in those days is you like decide to do it. It just the opportunity presents itself and it's a no-brainer. You obviously go towards it and you walk through every door that's opened, and then you look for more doors to open or to kick down or whatever it is. And then you blink and it's been 15 years, almost 20 years, and you realize that you never really made the decision to do it. And once that enters your mind, it starts to become like, oh, every time, especially now, where you write songs, record a record, release the record, tour to promote the record, do it again. That's kind of like in the business they call that an album cycle.
Sure.
And And you really go album cycle by album cycle, especially as you get older and you're a little more protective of your personal time. And so in the early days, there was a lot of gradient. Like you'd be touring for one album, but also deeply busy writing the next album because you couldn't stop. But now it's like, okay, let's take like 3 months, 6 months, go hang out with our kids. People live in different cities, blah, blah, blah. So consequently, when it comes time to start again, everyone does kind of have to like pick it up and combine that with the fact that, the job has changed for a million reasons.
Mm.
Yeah, just what it means to pick it up again, both because we're older and our circumstances have changed, and also the industry has completely transformed since we started doing it. Like it's basically unrecognizable at this point. And all of that combined, especially with the intervention of COVID, knocking things even further off axis for a few years, that it just kind of, we realized that we didn't have to do another album cycle. We didn't have to pick it back up. And then when you all of a sudden we looked at it from that angle, and I think that we just kind of were struck by what the possibility meant. And the it's dizzying because, like I said, it's all we wanted to do. We wanted to do it so bad.
Of course.
But then that almost makes the idea of like, what if we choose to walk away from this? There's this like power that comes back into you. And for so long, you feel like you've been at the mercy of the business and of the industry. And like when you get an email that says, hey, this door is open, you have to go walk through the door because we're not Kings of Leon, like we can't take 5 years off and pay our bills. And so to be like, oh, maybe we don't have to push that rock up the hill. Maybe we can gracefully, rather than trying to push it again. And every time it feels more and more likely it's going to roll back and flatten us. We can just stop at the bottom of the hill or the top, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it.
I think it's pretty much going to be at the top because looking at the tour, there's lots of sold out nights, and you're adding extra dates, and it looks like
Yeah.
you're going to be walking out at the top.
Well, and that's not that we considered this at all. And it really genuinely was a surprise to us, the extent to which people responded enthusiastically. And that really defined how it became. We initially were like, okay, like let's put out the songs and we'll do one last show in Toronto at the Opera House or something, which is, that's like a 650 capacity venue in Toronto for any non-Torontonian listeners. And then it just took on a life of its own, which has also been so cool and narratively satisfying because that's what it was like for us in the early days. In like 2006, 2007, you'd announce some show, you'd announce some tour, and then you'd be getting phone calls that day being like, oh my God, we got to size it up. We got to add nights. We got to go to a bigger venue. So we thought that was normal, which is, probably was not good for our brains and expectations in those days. But to get to feel that one more time is a really nice way to cap it off.
Of course. And you're kicking off in Halifax, which is my little hometown.
Oh, great.
And I noticed that in-flight safety is opening for you, and I love
Yes.
in-flight safety, so that's very exciting. And I can't wait to hear how that show is going to go. In fact, I think you've added a second show in Halifax.
Yeah, we're doing 2 nights in Halifax. Last time we played in Halifax, it was the best show of the tour. It was amazing. So I'm optimistic. And I love that venue and everything.
Yeah, it's great. I'm interested to ask, on your profile, it says musician and broadcaster.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about the broadcaster part.
Yeah, I did a sizable stint at CBC Radio 3 years ago, which doesn't really exist anymore in the form it existed back then, but it was like it was a really ahead of its time online streaming radio station that played only Canadian indie music and like was kind of first to the line on stuff like Broken Social Scene and Arcade Fire and a lot of Canadian bands that blew up. They were playing when they were still, totally unknown because they had a mandate to only play independent Canadian music.
Sure.
And was so cool and introduced me to so much music I liked. And then, yeah, I realized that they had a lot of band guys on doing guest hosting. This Jay and Chris from Sloan did it.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Turfry, Buck 65, who now is a permanent host on CBC Radio 2, was on Radio 3 at one point. Nirmala from Controller was on it. And so I thought, that sounds like something I might be good at. That sounds like something I might like to do. I'm going to take every interview with them and really, turn it up to 10 and be, very verbose and very like really give my broadcaster voice or whatever. And sure enough, I weaseled my way in to do some guest hosting, and then it just went well, and I kept going back and I kept going back, and I did it probably on and off for like 5 or 6 years, and towards the end was doing it pretty regularly. And then it got to a point where I was like, hey, can I do more stuff on bigger radio stations? And they sort of had to tell me that the thing about radio is people want reliability and they want to know who the host is. And so if you're going to be gone all the time on tour, that doesn't make you a great candidate for being in the building ready to come out of the bullpen, you know? And so then it kind of that I ended up going off in my own direction with it and doing the band instead, which I think was the right choice. Although now that the band is ending and I don't know what I'm going to do for a job, I do wonder if maybe I should have kept a foot more in the door.
You do have the voice.
Well, thank you for saying so. My grade 10 English teacher, we were like on the first day of class, we were going around introducing ourselves or whatever. And she said, you have a very nice voice. No one had ever told me that before, and it really stuck with me.
Oh, very good. When you look back at the lifeline of the band, I mean, you've been nominated for numerous Junos, just to name a big name.
Mm-hmm.
So you've played Coachella, Lollapalooza, Glastonbury, Reading and Leeds Festival. You're coming to play Canada Day, which is in Trafalgar Square, which is like the most amazing setting in London.
Yep.
I mean, the memories that you have are
Yeah.
amazing.
And the resume is so impressive, especially when you realize, because now it's also been almost 20 years, like I said. So there's a lot of highlights. And if you go right down to the highlights, sounds damn good. And it felt damn good. I wish, and I'm sure everyone who's done this job, who's been on this adventure would say the same thing. I wish that I'd been a little more present in it. I wish that I'd known, because a lot of this stuff, Glastonbury, Reading, Leeds, David Letterman, a lot of that stuff, I was 21, 22. And that is simply not an age where you're given to sort of centering yourself and looking around and appreciating the moment. I really, I'm embarrassed to say, but I really took it all as my due. We just thought like, yeah, this is how it's supposed to work. We're a good band. We're getting the due adulation
Yeah,
that we deserve for putting these cool songs out in the world. So away we go. And you think it's forever. It felt like, oh, this rocket ship will never stop going straight up. And so I'll appreciate it next time we play Glastonbury, which of course we never got to play it again.
sure.
But I remember it. And of course, if you spend all your time trying to cherish those things, then you're not really present at all. You're thinking about it after the fact during it. So everything I remember is great. I feel like there's things just out of reach of my memory that I wish I could grasp, that are even funnier, but that's life, I guess.
It is. It is. Life gets in the way of things, doesn't it?
It has a way of doing that. But of course, life is the thing at the end of the day. So you just got to look at what's in front of you.
How has the music industry changed throughout your band's life? And what has been the most challenging change that you've had to kind of change your ways because of progression?
I mean, I guess I'm wondering if it's too simplistic to just boil it all down to streaming, but it kind of feels like streaming is both it explains everything. And I don't know how much is chicken and egg and what came from where. And the music industry is really just a long linear history of people figuring out how to extract value from music and get as much of it up to the top, just like most industries, as possible. And streaming is the natural next step in that. Like, oh, we figured out how to do it. Everybody wants to pay $10 a month to hear every song ever created on demand. And that means that if we get that $10 a month, we can make ourselves rich. There's only one problem. We can't afford to pay the musicians anything. Oh, well, we just won't. And what are they going to do about it? And the answer is two or more. So the material change for us has just been the fact that like we always had to cobble together a living. As an indie band, this is how you do it. It's like people would always ask me, oh, do you make most of your money from touring? Do you make most of your money from I don't make most of my money from anywhere. I make bits of money from touring and bits of money from royalties and bits of money from selling records and bits of money from selling t-shirts. And if someone puts a song in a TV show or a movie, you make some money from that. And those, all of those little pots have gotten smaller and smaller. And especially now after COVID, touring has become really crazy. And in some ways, it appears more lucrative because ticket prices have gone up, but also that changes how many people can access the shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess all of that's a long-winded way of saying that it just is like, for us, it just got harder and harder to say no to anything. You and it's obviously, this probably sounds spoiled to people who wake up in the morning and go to a 9 to 5 job every day to say like, oh, you need to protect your time. But the truth of making art is that it doesn't happen on a schedule. That means that the lifestyle of not, you go on tour and that's hard work in its way. And it's different hard work from like what an emergency room nurse does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think anyone doing it would agree after a month on the road that like, this is it's not a breeze, as much fun as it can be. And making records is hard and writing songs is hard if you take it seriously. And we always really did. And there's part of it that's so important is just like living a life and absorbing the world, because that's the stuff that you make the art out of. And I think that as another big difference in the industry in general is that it's just people have less and less patience for art. They don't want it to be art. They want it to be content. And people can make that, that's like, there's plenty of people who wake up and go to work at 9 or 10 or whatever every day and are churning out, they sit down with Ableton and a co-writer and they can churn out pop songs with great catchy choruses and cool sounds and stuff. And I don't mean to denigrate that stuff, but I think that there is a procedural difference and there is a philosophical difference, at least to me, between art and content. And content is great. If you're an executive, you want more content because that's what you sell. That's what's on Spotify. But art is annoying and it doesn't happen on a timetable and it has like other priorities. And nobody wants a priority that isn't quick returns. I've been working on a podcast that I haven't launched or anything yet, but it's about major label debuts and bands that took that step. And so I've talked to a bunch of band people, producers about making records, and largely in the 90s, because that was kind of the heyday of like alt bands getting signed to major labels. And it's amazing. I expected them all to have these horror stories, but the main thing is like, oh no, they would sign a band and then wait 4 records for them to break. And they would develop it and they would let it grow and let the band become what the band was going to become. And sometimes it really worked. And I think that's not, that kind of long-term thinking is not in the cards right now.
It's very instant. It's very TikTok right now and very
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So like social media. And so I guess you guys have had to find your way because when you first started, there was no social media.
Yeah, there was MySpace, and we were really known as a MySpace band.
Okay.
It was kind of, to my awareness, was sort of the first social media.
I think so. Yeah.
And so we've been there through all of them until the next one, I guess.
Yeah. So how did you adapt to that? Did you have someone to do your social stuff, or were you guys hands-on?
We were hands-on. And I was always an internet guy. I was always a real computer geek in high school and everything. I spent a lot of time on message boards and I was going to say Googling stuff, but I don't even know if it was Google in 2000.
I don't think it was. I don't know what it was, no. But yeah.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even remember. But it was natural for me to be like, ooh, I ran the MySpace and I liked interacting with people and responding to messages. And I liked having a platform. I liked people listening to what I said. That's a real, I like to talk and it's fun when people listen, even if, it has less to do with what I'm saying and more to do with what band I play in. Beggars can't be choosers. And so at first I thought, Twitter, what a cool thing. And I get to talk directly to our fans, and Instagram, posting pictures. That stuff's really fun. We were really into blogging. We were really into making like little videos that we would post on the internet. And the thing that, again, got in the way of all that is that we were doing it perhaps not as art. I wouldn't say that my Instagrams or our blogs or anything quite would qualify as that, but for fun, the way that in high school we would get a handy cam and spend the weekend making a movie, some silly thing, because it was fun. It was a way to make something with your friends, which is just what the band is. But then, of course, it goes into the machine and they're like, ooh, content. And
Sure.
so over the years, social media went for us, or for me at least, from something that was a fun, natural, honest way to just engage with the fans and like provide sort of a corollary to the music itself, just like a music video would be, or an interview or a photo shoot or whatever else. And then it, of course, slowly but surely becomes an obligation. And then it starts to be like, it's really ideal if you do an Instagram twice a day at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Like
Exactly.
you're on tour, and it's really, again, this sounds probably so spoiled, but there's something about sitting in a van for 6 hours every day that just makes it really difficult to do anything. Of course, I'm sitting there for 6 hours. I can do stuff on my phone. I can do stuff on my
Hmm.
computer. No, I can't. My brain is fried. I can stare slack-jawed out the window.
And being on
And
tour is, and people think it's really exciting, and it's just kind of sitting around and waiting for a long time. And
it's,
then the
yeah.
show is like 90 minutes, and then you're on to the next sitting and waiting.
Yep, yep. And you're not seeing much. You're seeing a lot of venue backstages and your bus or your van, hotel lobbies. And
Hmm.
that's, I like that. I mean, and I'm looking forward to doing it one last time. I've really come to love that lifestyle. There's nothing like it. And
Are you guys going to document this last tour?
somehow, yeah. I mean, I got my camera. I'll certainly be taking a lot of pictures. We haven't discussed yet the notion of like bringing someone to film it to whatever end. And a few people have reached out, documentary
Sure.
makers or whatever. And it's really hard to know because on one hand, I think that it would be great to have it documented. And I do think it's not just an interesting thing that it's our last tour, but the moment at which we are doing it, not and in the music industry, and also like we're touring through the States in November, and like we're gonna be there while they have the election. And so,
Wow.
and I think that juxtaposition of, this sort of indie band on its last ride with this, the context is so glaringly unavoidable. I think that's really interesting. But also, when you bring someone in there to document the tour, it changes the very nature of it. You're now when you're on the bus in the safe space with you and the crew, the touring party, where it's like, it's just us. We're all here together. Now there's someone, not just another person, but the possibility of untold other people.
That's
And that
right.
changes how you experience it and how you behave and stuff. And I don't want to adulterate our experience of the last tour, because the most important part to me is that we get, I don't know, that it's meaningful, because it's already
Sure.
so meaningful. I want to get that meaning out of it. And I want to
Of
be able to
course.
look back on it. It's a gift, really, to have, like I was saying earlier, you miss so much. You don't remember to look around. It's moving too fast. You're tired, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
But this is a chance that we know we've got this much time. And so now when it's 5 a.m. lobby call and I'm exhausted, I want to remember that it's like, yeah, but also this is maybe the last 5 a.m. exhausted lobby call, the last time I'll smell what like a Holiday Inn lobby smells like at 5 a.m. with the eggs have just started cooking and no one's around yet. And the tired desk person is almost ready to go home from their night shift. And that's an experience in the world. And I want to savor it. And if there's a person standing there with a video camera, I keep miming that they're using some gigantic video camera from 1994, but I don't know if that'll enhance the experience or take away from it. So
Yeah.
TBD, in short.
Interesting. Very interesting. How did the pandemic change any dynamics within the band?
I mean, I think we're still
Because
learning about that.
yeah, Canada's was really strict.
We had already by that point, a couple of the guys had moved to one guy to the States, one guy to East Coast Canada. And so we were already, there was this newish phase for the band of being far apart.
Hmm.
And the pandemic popped right into the middle of that, which, so in some ways it didn't derail us at first that much, because 2020 was always going to be a light year and people were gone anyway. So especially at the beginning, it felt really natural. And one thing that we all know how to do is live with no schedule and nowhere to go and nothing to do, because you between tours you learn how to fill those days without just staring at the TV for 24 hours. Um, but I think it was kind of has to do more with what I said earlier, where it's just like the momentum was already ready to flag just because of all the various circumstances of geography and everything else. And so having this enforced stop really let the momentum like, and so it made starting it up again that much harder, and therefore gave us that much more room to consider, like, what if we don't start it up again? Or what if we start it up, but with now an end goal in mind?
Right.
For me personally, I loved it, honestly. I feel like I had the greatest pandemic of anyone on earth. I felt so, I don't want to say I feel guilty about it, because it's not like I wasn't, in a castle in the Swiss Alps or anything. I was just in my
Hmm.
tiny apartment in Toronto collecting government largesse, thank God. But having not only the time to be at home, but also with nothing on the horizon, I just found myself really doing a lot of like introspective thinking and philosophical ruminating. And it, I don't know, I feel like I finally entered my 30s belatedly. I was like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, wait a minute. Who am I? And what do I want out of life? And what does this mean to me? And all these things, being absent from it. So, and I have to think I took that with me back into the band world. And that's what happens. We all, I was just talking about this last night. You grow up with these four guys. We were all together from when we were, I mean, we started the band when we were 18, but we'd already been friends for years before that. But then that unit kind of doesn't, it's so locked in that it, you don't grow within it in the same way you grow outside of it. And so you're on these two parallel tracks where, on one hand, you're a whole human entering the world and meeting new people and having new friendships and relationships, and people have babies and people die and all the things that happen in a life that change from when
Hmm.
you're 16 to 36. But then on a parallel track is this relationship that's like in amber, and this beautiful thing that doesn't grow and change in the same way, because it's like, I don't know why. It's bands, bands don't seem to grow and change in the same way. You build these dynamics between you, and then they have their own, they have a life of their own.
Hmm.
And this was also the longest time we'd ever been apart. And the longer you're apart, the more when you come back together, you realize, like, oh, interesting. These clothes don't fit me like they used to, which was also literally a problem for me after 2 years of lockdown.
I think it was for everybody.
Yeah. So that's about as much as I can probably psychoanalyze it. But I suspect that as life goes on, I will realize more and more that it was like, for everyone, it was just like this. It was the biggest thing that's ever happened while I've been alive in the world. And
Hmm.
living through a historical moment like that is, yeah, oh, it really knocks you off your axis. It really
Hmm.
changes things.
Hmm. What do you think the feeling is going to be like when you play that last song at the end of the tour?
I've really been wondering about that. Um, I I have no idea. I don't even think that I'm close to comprehending what it might feel like. Because on one hand, I've done a lot of last shows of tour, and the last song is always triumphant, and there's a no small amount of relief. Because it's just like, by the time you get to the last show, you've played
Hmm.
the songs 100 times, you've done the show a bunch of times, you've coiled the cables, you've moved the amps, you've loaded the trailer, you've gone to the hotel, you've eaten the pizza, and it usually feels like, okay, good, I could use a break. And so I suspect instinctively I'll be feeling like that, and then my brain will keep reminding me that, like, this isn't a break, man. This is, that's next time you coil the cable and pack the trailer, it's going off into the sunset. And I I I don't know if I'm going to be, just chilling up there, or if I'm going to be like melting down like Roman Roy at his father's funeral halfway through the second song, like inconsolable and panicking. And I'm content to leave it up to fate for the time being. I guess we'll see. And I just want to do it truly. I want to, whatever it is that happens, I hope that it happens real good.
Sure. And I would imagine because it's in Toronto, isn't it? So I would
Yeah.
imagine you'll have your friends and family there, and it will be sort of
Yeah.
it will be it's a big deal.
Yeah. And it's 4 nights at the same venue to close it
Amazing.
off, which is a really, I think that'll give us some, so we'll be able to spread out the emotion a bit, which I think is very useful. And also, I imagine we'll be drained by them because every show on this tour for the people of Dallas, Texas, or the people of London, or wherever it is we go, the people of Halifax, for them, that is the emotional last one.
It
And
is.
so we're going to be going through that ringer night after night after night, which means the other thing that can happen and is really hard to avoid is that that emotion, that like pure sadness, but not like, tragedy, just the understanding of what's going away. It's going to be hard to not have that become rote and you start to
Hmm.
perform it. Being on stage, you have your moves and you have your things you repeat every night. And at least for me, those have always come out of honest things. Oh, I really had fun doing a jump at that moment in that song, which I did spontaneously once, but everyone loved it and I loved it. So now I'm going to start doing the jump in that moment. And then fast forward 2 years and you're like, I'm on autopilot. The jump is now it's jukebox shit. It's performance. And that's
Exactly.
our job, is to take honesty and turn it into performance. And that tension is always really interesting and productive. But now the thing that we might be performing with some degree of like cynicism almost is one of the purest emotions that probably I'll ever get to experience in my life. And so to keep it honest, I think is going to be probably the hardest part of this entire thing.
Of course. Cool. So let's move into the quick fire round and let's see what we've got. No pressure. If you had a theme song for your life, what would it be?
What a wonderful world. I
Have you
heard it
ever
on the
had
radio this morning. It really took me off guard. I was like, oh, I'm going to cry now. It's beautiful.
a funny celebrity encounter?
Our first bus tour ever was a summer festival tour through the UK and Europe. We did that was Glastonbury, Reading, Leeds, Tea in the Park, Oxygen, and then like out to Sweden and shit, playing all these festivals. And it was all the same bands are always on the bill of these things, of course. And we were on the bus because it was the only way to get from point A to point B to point C in time. But we
Hmm.
didn't have enough money really to have a bus. So we had like a cheap, dirty bus. We didn't have any, usually you get one hotel room to have showers in and stuff. Didn't
Yep.
get any of that. Food was tight, just like no PD per diem money. So at the festivals, you get like a meal ticket for lunch and a meal ticket for dinner. And you're allowed to go in and have your food with your ticket and then you're out.
Right.
But we would come back at the end of the night. And if you came back at the end of the night, you could usually get some, if they had a sandwich left over, they'd usually take pity on you. And we'd go and basically like scrounge, like, like urchins and Oliver Twist. But it was when Modest Mouse was one of the bands that was on all these shows. And it was when Johnny Marr, one of the most legendary and great musicians of all time, was on that tour. And I swear to God, every single time we went to the catering tent to try and scrounge leftovers, Johnny Marr would be sitting there alone eating like a huge sandwich that was obviously the best thing that was left. And every time we're like, Johnny Marr. And we never talked to him. And I don't know, I would love someday, I hope I get to meet him and ask him, because surely he must have noticed at a certain point these like sad Oliver-esque, watery eyed Canadians watching him eat our sandwich that we were dreaming of. We're like, Johnny Marr, you're a rich man.
Give us your
Buy
sandwich.
buy a sandwich. Give us your sandwich. And that was I can see him in my mind's eye. I don't know if he literally had a guitar on his lap, because some of these memories you start to mythologize yourself. You tell the story too many times. But in
Hmm.
my mind's eye, he's sitting there with one knee up, big lanky leg, beautiful jazz master sort of on his lap, just eating this giant, beautiful sandwich. And I
Mocking
probably
you.
cherish that memory more than I would have ever cherished the sandwich. But yeah, absolutely mocking us. Dave, our singer, was once asked specifically to sign a record for I think the singer of Disturbed, whose name I'm spacing on. Is David something, I think. Sorry to him if I'm getting it wrong. But I remember it was in the heyday, it was like 2010. Champ had just come out. And I remember because there's a video, we had someone taking video of us, and there's a video of Dave spelling out the man's last name as he signs this record. Because the guy was like, I love Tokyo Police Club. Could the singer sign a record for me, I guess?
Amazing.
Which I found quite amusing.
What's the strangest talent you possess?
I'm really good at reading a Wikipedia article, like cold reading it for the first time in a way that I think is engaging and dramatic. I wish people asked me to do that more often, honestly. I love doing it. I love whipping it out.
Have you ever had a "you won't believe that happened" moment?
I feel like in a way my entire career has been a bit of a you won't believe that happened moment. We once had to like walk across the border with all of our instruments because our van broke down. And we were like, the walking border is just this little turnstile, with the metal crossbars. And so we had on the bridge in Niagara Falls, America/Canada, one guy had to go through, and then we had to all of our giant cases, which didn't fit in the turnstile, we had to push them over top of it. So on some grainy security camera at the border, they just see these four shaggy 23-year-olds start pushing giant boxes over the border. But they did let us into Canada, and they just seemed like they really felt sorry for us at that point. And frankly, we deserved it.
Oh my goodness. What's the strangest thing you've ever found in your pocket?
The One Ring. No, I find like bits of food in my pocket more often than especially like my breast pocket. I'll be at a restaurant or something and like eating a chip, and whoa, it crumbled. And I'm like, it just went right in my pocket. Or the turn-ups of my jeans too. They'll collect. It's not good. I have like this mess. I make mess when I eat. I don't know. I'm almost 40 years old. I got to stop having food go in my pockets,
At least you get a
but I
snack
don't know
at the end of
how.
the day. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm saving it for later.
What's your favorite part of the day when you're on tour?
Well, this tour we're not doing the van, but there's a part of me that kind of loves the drive more than anything else. The liminal space, especially, well, everywhere, but especially in America, I've found because there's so much to see out the window. If some days, like if you're driving, particularly around the Southwest, you'll go through what looks like five different planets on one drive. And you'll like come around a corner, and all of a sudden you're in this beautiful valley, and then you come around a corner and you're in salt flats and there's mountains. And just like sitting in the passenger seat, like I said earlier, staring slack-jawed out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, the more time I've spent out there, it's all great. I love getting the first coffee. I love the show most nights. I love after the show when you finish the show and you get like the post-show beers. Great. But sitting in that van watching the world go by, I think is what I'm going to miss maybe almost more than anything else.
I was just thinking of another question, actually, talking about the show. How important is interacting with the fans going to be on this tour?
Really important. And I am curious and excited to see what it ends up being like.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, we have been, it's so hard to say stuff like this and not sound disingenuous. And it kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier about how there is a performative nature. And we've all worked a room and we've all schmoozed and pressed to the flesh. I'm sure you know how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to remind yourself, it's like, I'm not schmoozing right now. I'm having a human interaction. But of course, it can be weird with fans because they don't really like, they don't know who you are. They know the music you made. And so you're not having the kind of human interaction that you'd have with like your brother or your old friend or whatever. But still, you're like, okay, you love the music we made and it means something to you. And you're trying to express that. And that's not to be too corny, but that's what it's all about. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only reason you get to do any of it. And people have already been so kind and sweet and like forthright with their feelings about what the band has meant to them and their memories. And this is something that social media can do really well. It's
Mm-hmm.
provided a way for people to really quickly, even if it's one sentence, oh, I loved this show when you played this song, it was so special. No one is ever going to take the time to write that in a letter and send it to your PO box, but now you get to hear it. And hearing it in person is, I think, going to be really beautiful. It's going to be a lot, and people are going to want to tell you their whole tale. And for a long time, we were selling the merch ourselves after the shows. Josh, our guitar player, and I would man the merch table and sell the t-shirts. That we didn't need to have another body in the van. And we found it was really something to do. And it was a great way to interact with fans.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about it for this tour and we were like, the lineup will never end because every single person is going to want to talk to us. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to be like, I need to sell a t-shirt to these other 300 people. And so we're not selling the merch this time. We're just going to only devote ourselves to yakking with people and taking pictures and stuff. I think it's going to be beautiful. And I think it's going to define the tour. I mean, and of course, the show itself is ultimately an interaction between us and the fans. It's more rhetorical, but that's the heart of it, and then everything around it is sort of the bonus stuff. And yeah, I think that's what's going to make the tour into whatever it becomes.
Define yourself in 3 words.
Enthusiastic, earnest, I hope, believer,
Describe Canada in 3 words.
vast, unknowable. I'm trying to think of one word to sum up. Like my mind is like mountains, Hudson's Bay, history, present. I mean, horror and atrocity, beauty and art. And I'm like, what's the word for that? Country. uh, it was profoundly human. How about that?
What does being Canadian mean to you?
Well, for me, and there's many ways to be Canadian, obviously. For me, it's been a stroke of damned good luck. It's I realize more and more as I get older. I arrived in a place at a moment as a type of person who it's been a real smooth ride. Even talking about COVID, just I went on the website every 2 weeks and pressed a button and they sent me money. And that was what I did. And I was like, great, now I'll send this money to the beer company that brings me beer. And none of my shirts will fit me anymore. And that's not to be glib, but that's and with the obviously we've benefited so much from like the granting system and the way that the government supports. Again, I feel obligated to has supported some kinds of the arts, and certainly a lot of the arts that are conducted by folks who look like me. And I think that's all starting to agonizingly slowly change. But I think that more and more, and I'm sure as I look back as I get older and older, I'll be like, holy shit, that's about as good a deal of cards, as good a hand as anyone ever got dealt on day one of their life. And so I hope I've played them with some degree of responsibility.
What does being a man mean to you?
I feel like I'm really figuring that out. I feel like I was a boy. And I mean, even making a distinction between boy and man connotes certain things that to different people that I may or may not actually endorse or believe. But I think it means maybe being responsible for being alive among people, understanding that you are one among many, and one stitch of the fabric of this quilt that makes up your community, your city, your country, the planet. And not only remembering that and being aware of that, but understanding that that brings with it a certain responsibility to your fellow human, to, I guess, just act in a way that if everyone acted in that way, it would be a sustainable way to live. That's easier said than done sometimes, and especially in our line of work, which making art, God knows the history of the arts is riddled with selfish assholes who I don't think behaved in any of the ways I'm describing and made great art, to the point where I think there's a real still strong belief that the path to making great art is via selfishness, and I really don't think that that's true, and I really think that's a pernicious lie, and I think that's also true in business. And in politics, it might actually be true, which might be, part of the general issue with things right now everywhere. But yeah, I don't know. It's so increasingly important to me as I get older and spend more time in the world, just to be like, boy, love is the only thing really that has like meaning, and to spread love and share love, and whatever that means. The love I have for my fiance is different than the love I have for my bandmates, is different than the love I have for a stranger on the street or someone I'll never meet in another country. But I think of all of those things as manifestations of like what it means to be human beyond like a brain and a body that walks around and eats, and I think that that's, whether it's a blessing or a curse that we're the animal that has that knowledge, it's what we got to work with. And I think that you got to work with it in a positive way, and work towards a better understanding. There's a friend of mine went to like an artsy high school, and he took a class called Becoming Fully Human. that was just sort of, a hippie multidisciplinarian thing. But the title of it always stuck with me. And I feel like our task is to become fully human, or my task is. And I think that, so being a man to me means trying to become fully human, and in all the ways that all the ways that turns out to mean, which is, I think I'm just at the beginning of understanding that.
What does the future look like for Graham Wright?
But this is the first time in my life I probably haven't had a solid answer for that question. Because I always knew I wanted to play guitar. I mean, since I was old enough to want to do anything, I wanted to be in a band. And then I was thinking about this yesterday. I was just sitting on the couch and it hit me. I was like, and I got to. I mean, I wanted it so bad. I wanted it so bad. And then I did. Not only did I get it, I kind of like got it for free. It worked right away, and then I got to do it for 20 years. So I don't even know how to decide what to do next. And luckily the tour is big enough, and there's some runway for me before I have to figure it out. But I'll keep making music. I'll tell you that. It will have music in it. The future for Graham Wright will never not have a guitar and a notebook full of lyrics. And where that leads me, I look forward to finding out.
Last question. Is New Blues in the set list for Canada Day? Because I do know someone that would be very upset if it wasn't.
I think it probably will be. It's in the set list that's like that we'll be drawing from. But it's a shorter set. I don't know if it's 60 minutes or 50 minutes. And New Blues is like almost a 5-minute. And so sometimes it does get sliced. However, I will note that it has been requested and pass that on, because sometimes that's how you make the decision.
By the executive of Canada Day.
Okay, that does
so
seem
no pressure.
It is coming down from on high.
So John, I did ask the question. Just putting it out there.
All right, John, there you go. I'll pass it on.
Thank you very much, Graham Wright. I loved our conversation, and I look forward
great talk.
I look forward to welcoming you to London. Thank you so much, and I will see you in 3 weeks.
Looking forward to it. Wow.